Commander Zikthara stood in the great hall of the Galactic Council. His 4 arms hung at his sides as hundreds of alien beings watched him from their floating seats. The blue skin on his face showed the deep scars from many battles. His yellow eyes looked straight ahead as the council speaker began to talk about his victories. "This warrior has fought in over 300 battles across the galaxy," the speaker said. His voice echoed through the massive room. "He has never lost a single fight. He has saved 12 different worlds from destruction." Zikthara did not smile. He never smiled. But inside, he felt proud of what he had done. The other aliens in the room looked at him with respect. Some of them whispered to each other about his famous battles. Young soldiers from many different species had read books about his strategies. His name was known in every corner of the galaxy. The speaker continued reading from a long list. Commander Zikthara destroyed the crystal armies on Nexus Prime. He broke through the energy shields around the thermal rings. He led the final attack that crushed the robot armies of the synthetic collective. Each victory had been hard won. Zikthara remembered every battle, every fallen soldier under his command. The crystal warriors on Nexus Prime had been 8 feet tall and could shoot deadly beams from their hands. The robots of the synthetic collective had been perfect fighters, with no fear and no mistakes. But Zikthara had found ways to beat them all. "He has earned the highest honors from the Valdori Empire," the speaker went on. "He has been given medals by 6 different alien governments. 3 species have made him an honorary member of their military forces." The blue-skinned commander had trained his whole life for war. His people, the Valdori, were natural soldiers. They had 4 arms to hold more weapons. Their thick skin could stop most small bullets. Their eyes could see in the dark and spot enemies from far away. But even among his own warrior people, Zikthara was special. "Now we have a new mission for our greatest hero," the speaker announced. The room became very quiet. "We need someone to make contact with a new species that has just started exploring space." A large screen appeared in the air above the council. It showed a small planet that was blue and green with white clouds. The planet looked peaceful and beautiful. It seemed like a nice place to live. "This is the 3rd planet in a system they call Sol," the speaker explained. "The species calls themselves humans. They come from a world they call Earth. They have just begun to travel between the stars." Zikthara looked at the planet on the screen. It did not look dangerous. The oceans were blue like his skin. The green parts must be where plants grew. The white clouds looked soft and gentle. He had seen many worlds during his career, and this one seemed like one of the safer ones. "The humans have been expanding into space," another council member said. "They have built colonies on nearby planets. They have started mining operations in their star system. Our trade ships have spotted their vessels in sectors close to our space." The council member was a tall, thin alien with gray skin and large black eyes. His people, the Ethereals, were very smart and peaceful. They did not like conflict and always tried to solve problems with words instead of weapons. "We want to establish peaceful relations with these humans," the Ethereal continued. "We want to set up trade agreements and make sure our borders are respected. We think Commander Zikthara would be the perfect choice to lead this diplomatic mission." Several other council members nodded their heads. They all agreed that Zikthara was the right choice. After all, who would dare to fight against the most famous warrior in the galaxy? His reputation alone would be enough to make the humans listen and cooperate. But something strange happened. As soon as the council members mentioned the humans, Zikthara felt a cold feeling in his stomach. His 4 hands began to shake slightly. His yellow eyes grew wider. The other aliens in the room did not notice, but Zikthara felt something he had not felt in many years. He felt afraid. The feeling surprised him. He had faced armies of crystal warriors without fear. He had charged into battle against giant robots without hesitation. He had fought in the vacuum of space while explosions happened all around him. Nothing had ever made him feel scared before, but the word humans filled him with a deep, cold terror that he could not explain. "Commander Zekthara," the speaker called out, "will you accept this mission? Will you travel to human space and make contact with their leaders?" All eyes in the great hall turned to look at the famous warrior. They expected him to accept immediately. After all, this was just a diplomatic mission. There would be no fighting. He would simply travel to human space, meet with their government, and work out some basic agreements about trade and territory. What could possibly go wrong with such a simple mission? Zekthara opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His throat felt dry. His hands were shaking more now. The cold feeling in his stomach was getting worse. Images flashed through his mind, memories of stories he had heard from other soldiers. Stories that most beings in the galaxy thought were just rumors or lies. Stories about humans. "Commander?" The speaker asked again. "Is there a problem?" Zekthara forced himself to stand up straighter. He was a hero of the Valdori Empire. He had a reputation to maintain. He could not show fear in front of the entire Galactic Council. Whatever these humans were, they were just another alien species. How dangerous could they possibly be? "I accept the mission," he said. His voice was steady, but inside he felt like running away. The council members smiled and nodded. They were pleased with his answer. They began discussing the details of the mission. They talked about which ships to send, how many soldiers to bring, and what kind of gifts to offer the humans. But Zekthara was not listening anymore. His mind was focused on the stories he had heard, stories that had been whispered in dark corners of military bases, stories that veteran soldiers only told after they had drunk too much alcohol, stories about a species that fought in ways that no civilized being could understand. Stories about creatures that seemed to welcome death in battle, stories about warriors who never surrendered, even when facing impossible odds. Stories about humans. As the council meeting continued around him, Zekthara made a silent promise to himself. Before he left for human space, he would find the soldiers who had told those stories. He would learn everything he could about what he was really facing, because deep in his heart, the greatest warrior in the galaxy knew that this would not be a simple diplomatic mission. This might be the mission that finally broke his perfect record of victories. After the council meeting ended, Zekthara walked slowly back to his quarters. His forearms still shook slightly, and the cold feeling in his stomach would not go away. He needed to understand why the word humans filled him with such fear. He had to remember where he had first heard those terrible stories. 3 years ago, Zekthara had been stationed at the military base on Kepler Station. It was a busy place where ships from all over the galaxy stopped to refuel and repair. Soldiers from dozens of different species would meet there to share news and trade stories about their battles. One night, Zekthara had been walking through the station's cantina when he saw something unusual. A group of Krillian warriors was sitting in a dark corner, drinking heavily. This was strange, because Krillians were proud fighters who rarely showed weakness. They had hard shells covering their bodies like armor. Their society was built around conquest and strength. They feared nothing and no one, but these Krillians looked broken. Their mandibles clicked nervously when they spoke. Their compound eyes darted around the room as if they expected danger from every shadow. They kept their voices low and whispered to each other like they were sharing terrible secrets. Zekthara had approached their table. The Krillians knew his reputation, so they welcomed him to sit with them. But when he asked about their last battle, they all became quiet. Finally, their captain, a veteran warrior named Vextar, began to speak. "We fought the humans at Kepler Mining Station," Vextar had said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "It should have been easy. We had 30 ships. They had 3 small patrol vessels and maybe 50 soldiers defending the mining platform." Zekthara remembered thinking that it did sound like an easy victory. Krillian ships were heavily armed and well protected. Their warriors were experienced fighters. 50 humans with basic mining equipment should not have been able to stop them. "We sent them a surrender demand," Vextar continued. "We told them to give up the station or we would destroy it. We expected them to be smart and surrender without a fight." The other Krillians at the table made nervous clicking sounds with their mandibles. They remembered what happened next. "The human commander sent back a message," Vextar said. "His name was Jake Morrison. He said they would never surrender. He said we would have to take the station from their dead bodies." This was not unusual. Many species made brave speeches before surrendering. Most commanders liked to sound tough, even when they knew they could not win. Zekthara had heard similar words from dozens of defeated enemies. "So we attacked," Vextar went on. "We expected the humans to fight for a few minutes and then give up when they realized they could not win. But they did not give up. They never gave up." The Krillian captain took a long drink before continuing his story. His hands were shaking as he held his cup. "When we damaged their main weapons, they started shooting at us with mining lasers. When we destroyed their defense platforms, they used construction equipment to build new ones. When we boarded their station, they fought us with tools and spare parts." Zekthara had fought many desperate enemies before. This still did not sound too unusual. Trapped defenders often used whatever weapons they could find. "But then they started doing things that made no sense," Vextar said. His voice was getting quieter. "When their weapons ran out of power, they threw the empty guns at us like clubs. When they got injured, they kept fighting even with broken bones and blood covering their eyes. When they were cornered with no way to escape, they smiled." The other Krillians made more nervous clicking sounds. One of them, a young warrior with fresh scars on his shell, spoke up. "They smiled when they were about to die," he said. "They made jokes while we were shooting at them. One human had his arm blown off, but he picked it up and hit me with it while laughing." Zekthara felt the cold feeling starting in his stomach. This was not normal behavior for any species he knew. Most beings became more serious when facing death, not less. "The worst part was when they started destroying their own equipment," Vextar continued. "When they realized they could not stop us from taking the station, they began setting off explosions to damage it. They destroyed everything. They had built rather than let us have it. This was unusual. Most species tried to preserve their creations, even when they lost battles. They hoped to get their property back someday, or at least wanted to minimize the damage. But they did not just destroy equipment," the young Krillian said. "They destroyed themselves too. 3 humans locked themselves in the main power room and set off a massive explosion. They killed themselves just to take out 2 of our boarding parties." Zekthara had never heard of anything like this. Suicide attacks were extremely rare in galactic warfare. Most species had strong survival instincts that prevented them from deliberately killing themselves. The human commander, Jake Morrison, was the last one alive, Vextar said. "We cornered him in the command center. He was wounded and had no weapons left. We offered to let him live if he surrendered." The Krillian captain paused for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. He laughed at us. He said something about how his death would be worth it if it meant other humans would know how he fought. Then he pressed a button that sent out a signal to every human ship in the area. The message contained everything that had happened during our battle. Zekthara was beginning to understand why the Krillians looked so afraid. The human commander had turned his defeat into a lesson for his own species. Then Morrison activated the station's self-destruct system. Nextar finished. He killed himself and destroyed everything, just to deny us a complete victory. As he died, he was still laughing. The table fell silent. The other Krillians stared into their drinks. These proud warriors had won the battle, but they did not look like victors. They looked like they had seen something that would haunt them forever. "We took the station," Bextar said finally, "but it was completely ruined. We got nothing for our victory, except the knowledge that humans do not think like other species. They do not fear death. They use it as a weapon." That night at Kepler Station, Zeke Thara had thought the Krillians were exaggerating. Every species told stories about their enemies to make them seem more dangerous. He figured the humans had just gotten lucky or fought harder than expected. But over the next few years, he heard more stories. Stories from other species who had encountered humans in the border regions. Stories that all shared the same terrifying details. Humans who fought on despite injuries that should have killed them. Humans who refused to surrender even when facing impossible odds. Humans who seemed to enjoy battle more as it became more dangerous. And now, sitting in his quarters after the council meeting, Zekthara finally understood why those stories had filled him with such fear. The humans were not just another alien species. They were something completely different. Something that no military academy in the galaxy had prepared him to face. They were warriors who treated death as a friend instead of an enemy. Despite his fears, Zekthara knew he had to accept the mission. His reputation as the greatest warrior in the galaxy meant he could not refuse. If he showed fear now, other species would lose respect for him. Worse, they might think the Valdori Empire was weak. 2 weeks later, Zekthara stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Starfire. Around him, 19 other Valdori warships prepared for the journey to human space. He had chosen his best officers and most experienced soldiers. Each ship carried the latest weapons and defensive systems. If the stories about humans were true, he wanted to be ready. The journey to the Sol system took 6 weeks through hyperspace. During this time, Zekthara studied everything the Galactic Council had learned about humans. Most of the information came from long-range scans and intercepted communications. The humans did not know that other species had been watching them. What Zekthara read made him more worried. Humans had evolved on a world that seemed designed to kill them. Their planet had violent storms, earthquakes, and thousands of dangerous animals. Most species in the galaxy had evolved on peaceful worlds where cooperation was necessary for survival. But humans had learned to survive by fighting everything around them. Their history was full of wars. They had fought each other for thousands of years, using weapons that became more deadly over time. They had battles that lasted for years and killed millions of their own species. Even when they were not fighting wars, they created games and sports that were based on combat. The more Zekthara learned, the more he understood why the Krillians had been so afraid. Humans were not just willing to fight. They seemed to enjoy it. When the Valdori fleet finally reached the Sol system, they were met by a human patrol squadron. The human ships were smaller than the Valdori vessels, but they moved with a speed and precision that impressed Zekthara. Their formation was perfect, and they responded to commands instantly. The lead human ship sent a communication signal. On the screen appeared a human female with short brown hair and calm blue eyes. She wore a dark blue uniform with silver stripes on the shoulders. "Welcome to the Sol system," she said. "I am Admiral Patricia Williams of the United Earth Space Force. We received your diplomatic request from the Galactic Council. We are honored to meet with representatives of your government." Zekthara was surprised. The human admiral seemed polite and professional. She did not look like the savage warrior he had expected. Her voice was calm and friendly. Maybe the stories about humans had been exaggerated after all. "I am Commander Thara of the Valdari Empire," he replied. "We come in peace to establish relations between our peoples." Admiral Williams smiled. "Excellent. We have prepared a space station near our moon for the negotiations. My ships will escort you there safely." The trip to the space station took several hours. During this time, Thara observed the human patrol ships. Their crews seemed well-trained and disciplined. They followed proper space protocols and maintained professional communication. Everything seemed normal. The space station was impressive. It was large enough to hold both the human and Valdori delegations comfortably. The human engineers had built special areas where different species could breathe their preferred atmospheres. The meeting rooms were equipped with translation devices and comfortable seating for various alien body types. For 3 days, the negotiations went well. Admiral Williams and her team were reasonable and intelligent. They discussed trade agreements, territorial boundaries, and communication protocols. The humans seemed genuinely interested in peaceful relations with the Galactic Council. Thara began to relax. Perhaps the stories about human savagery were just rumors. Maybe humans were actually a civilized species that could be trusted. He started to think that this mission might be successful after all. Then everything changed. On the 4th day of negotiations, the station's alarms began to sound. Admiral Williams received an urgent message from her communications officer. "Admiral, we have a problem," the officer said. "A group of civilian ships is approaching the station. They are not responding to our communication attempts." Williams frowned. "Who are they?" "It appears to be a human extremist group called Earth First," the officer replied. "They oppose any contact with alien species. Intelligence reports suggest they have been planning some kind of attack." Thara felt the cold fear returning to his stomach. The humans had extremists who wanted to fight aliens. This was exactly the kind of situation that led to the horror stories he had heard. "How many ships?" Williams asked. 15 vessels, all converted civilian craft. They appear to be armed with improvised weapons. Admiral Williams turned to Thara. "Commander, I apologize for this situation. These people do not represent the official position of our government. We will deal with them quickly." But Thara was already watching the tactical display. The approaching ships were moving in patterns that made no sense. They were not flying in proper formation. They seemed to be ignoring basic safety protocols. Their flight paths were erratic and unpredictable. "Admiral," the communications officer called out again. "They are transmitting a message." "Put it on screen," Williams ordered. A human male appeared on the display. He had wild eyes and an angry expression. Behind him, Thara could see other humans shouting and waving weapons. "Alien scum!" the man yelled. "Get out of our system. Earth belongs to humans only. We will die before we let you contaminate our world." The transmission ended. "Admiral." Williams looked embarrassed and angry. "Commander Thara, please understand that these people are criminals. They do not speak for humanity. We will stop them before they can harm anyone." But Thara was no longer listening to her words. He was watching the tactical display as the extremist ships approached the station. Their movements were becoming even more erratic. Some of them were accelerating directly toward the station, as if they planned to ram it. "All ships, prepare for combat," Admiral Williams ordered. "Protect the diplomatic station at all costs." What happened next confirmed every terrifying story Thara had ever heard about humans. The extremist ships attacked with a fury that defied all military logic. They used their own vessels as weapons, deliberately ramming larger ships to create breaches for their allies. When their improvised guns failed, they fired pieces of their own ships as projectiles. When their engines were damaged, they continued, fighting using whatever system still worked. But the most disturbing thing was their communications. While professional soldiers from other species maintained radio silence during combat, these human extremists filled the channels with wild shouting, crude jokes, and constant encouragement to their friends. They treated the deadly battle like it was some kind of game. Zekthara watched in horror as one human pilot named Danny Rodriguez flew his damaged ship directly into an asteroid. The explosion created a debris field that destroyed 2 enemy vessels. Rodriguez's final transmission was cheerful and casual. "Tell my wife I love her," he said, laughing, "and tell her that her meatloaf recipe is still top secret." The man was about to die, but he was making jokes about food. The battle lasted only 20 minutes. The extremist ships were all destroyed or disabled. The diplomatic station was saved. Admiral Williams apologized again and promised that the criminals would be punished. But Zekthara could not forget what he had seen. These were not professional soldiers. They were ordinary humans with minimal training and improvised weapons. Yet they had fought with a ferocity that would have impressed the Krillian warriors. And they had done it while laughing. After the attack, the diplomatic talks continued. Admiral Williams and her team worked hard to make up for the embarrassment caused by the extremists. They offered better trade deals and promised to punish the people who had attacked the station. But Zekthara could no longer focus on treaties and agreements. He spent every free moment studying human military history. The humans had given him access to their historical records as a gesture of goodwill. What he found in those records was worse than his darkest fears. Humans had been fighting each other for their entire recorded history. While most species in the galaxy had brief periods of conflict before achieving peace, humans had waged constant war for thousands of years. Their planet was covered with the ruins of ancient battlefields. Their museums were full of weapons that had been used to kill other humans. The records showed wars that lasted for decades and killed millions. Humans had fought in every environment on their planet. They had battles in frozen wastelands where the cold should have killed them. They fought in burning deserts where the heat melted metal. They had underwater battles and fights in the sky using flying machines. But what truly terrified Zekthara was learning that humans had developed their most effective fighting techniques by studying their own wars. Every strategy, every weapon, every psychological trick had been tested against other humans first. They had learned to be perfect killers by practicing on their own species. Admiral Williams invited Zekthara to observe a human military training exercise. She thought it would help him understand that humans were disciplined soldiers, not savage beasts. Zekthara accepted, hoping to see something that would ease his fears. The training took place on a military base near Earth's moon. Zekthara watched as human soldiers practiced scenarios that would kill most other species. They fought in environments with no air to breathe. They continued missions even when their equipment failed. They maintained teamwork even when they were separated from their commanders and had no way to communicate. The human instructor was a veteran soldier named Sergeant Ben Davis. He had gray hair and scars on his arms from old battles. He explained that these extreme training exercises were based on real historical battles that humans had fought and won. "We trained for the worst possible situations," Davis told Zekthara. "Because humans have survived the worst possible situations. We have fought battles that should have been impossible to win, and we won them anyway." Zekthara watched the human soldiers practice fighting with broken weapons. He saw them continue their mission, even when they were injured and bleeding. Most disturbing of all, he watched them encourage each other with jokes and laughter, even during the most dangerous parts of the exercise. "Why do they laugh during combat?" Zekthara asked. Sergeant Davis smiled. "Because fear makes you think slower. Laughter keeps the mind sharp. A human who can laugh in battle is a human who can still think clearly enough to find a way to win." This was completely opposite to how every other species in the galaxy approached warfare. Most aliens became more serious and focused when facing danger. Humans became more cheerful and relaxed. Later that day, Admiral Williams took Zekthara to see a memorial dedicated to human war heroes. The memorial was a large wall covered with thousands of names. Each name represented a human who had died. In battle, these are just the heroes from our most recent wars, Williams explained. We have similar memorials for every conflict in our history. Humans have always been willing to die for causes they believe in. Zekthara read some of the names. On the wall, next to each name was a short description of how that person had died. Many of the descriptions involved humans sacrificing themselves to save their friends or complete their missions. Some had died by deliberately destroying themselves alone with their enemies. Do all humans think this way? Zekthara asked. Are you all willing to die in battle? Williams thought for a moment before answering. Not all humans are soldiers, Commander. Most of us prefer peace. But when we are threatened, yes, we will fight. And when we fight to win, no matter what the cost. She paused and looked at the memorial wall. The thing you have to understand about humans is that we evolved by facing constant threats. Our planet tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We survived by being tougher and more determined than anything that hunted us. Zekthara felt the cold fear growing stronger in his stomach. But you fight each other too, your own species. Yes, Williams admitted. We have fought many wars against each other. But those wars taught us valuable lessons. They made us better at surviving impossible situations. They showed us that humans can overcome any obstacle if we are determined enough. That night, Zekthara met privately with Admiral Williams in her quarters. He decided to share his real concerns about humanity's expansion into the galaxy. He spoke carefully, trying to sound like a worried diplomat instead of a terrified warrior. Admiral, he said, some species in the galaxy are concerned about human military capabilities. They fear that your people might be too aggressive for peaceful coexistence. Williams listened thoughtfully. When she replied, her words sent a chill through Zekthara's entire body. Commander, I understand those concerns, but there is something important you should know. Everything you have seen and heard about human military capabilities is based on our fights with each other. We have never actually fought a war against an alien species. She leaned forward in her chair. We have no idea what we are truly capable of when facing a completely different kind of enemy. Our weapons, our strategies, our psychological warfare, techniques have all been developed for fighting other humans. Against aliens, we might be far more effective than anyone realizes. The diplomatic mission ended 3 days later. On paper, it was a success. The humans and the Galactic Council signed treaties that established trade relationships and territorial boundaries. Both sides agreed to respect each other's space and work together for mutual benefit. Zekthara knew that the real result of the mission was much different. He had not prevented a war. He had simply delayed it while learning exactly how terrifying the enemy would be. As his fleet prepared to leave the Sol system, Zekthara filed his official report with the Galactic Council. He recommended that the treaties be accepted and that humans be invited to join the Galactic Federation as quickly as possible. His reasoning was simple. It was better to have humans as friends than as enemies. But in his private log, Zekthara wrote a very different assessment. He recorded his true thoughts about what he had learned during the mission. I have fought the crystal warriors of Nexus Prime without fear, he wrote. I have charged the energy weapons of the synthetic collective without hesitation. I have led attacks against impossible odds and won every time. Other species call me the greatest warrior in the galaxy. He paused, looking out at the stars through his cabin window. Earth was just a small blue dot in the distance, but he knew he would never forget what he had learned there. "But I know the truth now," he continued writing. "I am not a great warrior. I am simply a soldier who has never had to fight humans in a real war. I have seen what they do to each other, and I pray to the ancient gods of my people that I never see what they would do to us." The fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving the Sol system behind. But Zekthara's fears traveled with him. He had completed his mission and achieved diplomatic success. The humans would remain peaceful for now, but he knew that somewhere in the galaxy, some species would eventually make the mistake of threatening humanity. When that happened, the universe would learn what humans were truly capable of, when they stopped fighting each other and focused their attention on an alien enemy. And Zekthara, the greatest warrior in galactic history, hoped he would be far away when that day came.